All right, finally on to something worth showing. It took long enough, but we're finally going to get to talk about the detailing on this. This was pushed way back on the schedule. As I was building this whole thing, I had a schedule built out for when I wanted certain things done. And as I started getting closer to those deadlines, everything slowly started getting pushed back farther and farther. Main reason was because fitment and scaling were like top priority. And there were a bunch of things that I was just not happy with, and I was constantly doing small changes here and there. That took up like all of April, really. And I just checked, and this all started towards the middle of May, and the costume contest took place, because we're now speaking in past tense, took place the second weekend of June, I think, yeah. So detailing process started 4 to 5 weeks before the deadline, which sounds like a lot of time until you take into consideration that I work 12-hour work shifts and don't get to do anything on those days that I work, like nothing. So if it's 4 weeks, in reality, I have 2 weeks. Yeah, so it's a lot tighter than it actually sounds. So we're gonna try and cover as much as we can in this. There's just a little bit here and there on every piece. So we'll try and nail everything in order as best I can. I mean, in the background, you're still gonna see things jumping forward and backwards in terms of where they're at, but whatever. Okay, so first we'll touch the midsection real quick. First thing here, I think the last time we left off, I just had the basic cylinder with a few front and back plates and maybe the hooks for the hip plates. So this time around, I threw it on with the legs and everything else, and the idea was, even though you're never gonna see like the actual like cod piece and butt piece, I still wanted them to be there. So I figured with the legs on, I could trace out the available space for everything to kind of like make a rough eyeball of that kind of stuff. So tried everything on, legs and everything, midsection. Only had to go from the midsection down, that's all that mattered. And then took a couple pieces of paper, taped them together, held them up against me, and then just kind of drew out how much room I had like between my legs and around the leg pieces to kind of see what could fill in that, but still fill in the shapes of everything down there. And after I traced them out, took them back on the table, tried adding whatever bulges I need to by cutting around the folded end to make it wrap around. Did the same with the butt, gave it a little bit of a curve at the bottom so it kind of wrapped down underneath a little bit, and then traced them all out to foam. This was either 8 or 10 millimeter, just to keep it consistent and have it kind of hold its shape a little better. And then after that, glued them together and then attached them to the body piece. I left them unconnected at the base because I was still sliding the midsection over top of me, and then over top is a fixed harness, which is made from the backpack, which I covered in the midsection video months ago. Yeah, after I contact cemented them to the body piece, then I went through and gave them like a quick coat of hot glue, and I also pulled the front straps back behind it, so I had to cut a little notch to kind of squeeze them back through, otherwise they'd be hanging out in front. And then once those were on, I needed to close up the gap in the front. For some reason though, I must not have recorded it, but I don't have footage of me making the entire belt and finishing the rest of the front of the midsection, which is fine because there are probably about 2 more video clips. We'll see it done anyway, so it doesn't matter. All right, so nothing super fancy there, just starting off with some butts. After that came then the thighs. Just had to do the plating on the side of the thighs. I probably could have done this with paper, but I used some scrap 5mm foam, I think, and then just wrapped it around the whole thing and just started to draw the general shape of what I wanted. It was gonna be the same thing on both sides, so I only needed to make one. And I kept working at that until I got it pretty close to what I wanted, which was similar to what was on the action figure. Then knocked out all the small little details to figure them out. And by then I had a full 5mm piece of foam that was also just my template for the side plates. And then I made sure to just cut them all out. Yeah, I did have to kind of cut at a deep angle for the bottom hole on that. because there was going to be a another piece that would kind of fit inside that. So afterwards I ended up having to Dremel it down and stuff too. Once I got them about where I wanted, I taped them to the side first and then traced out where I wanted it to be. This way, if I needed to move anything, I could just move it before actually gluing anything down. And then once I got them both about where I wanted, then I traced them around with marker to make sure that those were exactly where I wanted. So when I went to start gluing everything, I knew exactly where each corner was going, where it was wrapping around the whole thing. That other way, there's no mistakes of me misaligning the whole thing. Because once you make contact cement touch, it's usually not easy to take it back off. Sometimes you can be lucky, but not always. Didn't really want to risk it, so the tracing helped. Then once the glue is all dried, just press it onto the leg, make sure I lined everything up with the outline, no problems. Let's see, and then from there, I did one more test fit to make sure everything was looking good. I don't think I had any other problems after that. All right, on to the shins. Yeah, so there was a lot of stuff still to do on these ones. First, started off by doing little shields on the side of the knees. I don't remember if they were already in place and I needed to thicken them up, or if I just hadn't put them in yet. It's hard to tell. It's not that my memory's bad, it's just I've done so much to these pieces over so long, I can't remember what I did and didn't cover. But yeah, since there's already mounting hardware for everything, this is one of the reasons I liked using buckles. So you see here, I had cut a hole in the side of this. This is so that the pre-existing hardware can then slide through it before I glue everything on. That way I can still take pieces off. Afterwards, I did start hard lining some stuff and then cutting off older clips. And apparently it don't show me attaching them because it's just now attached. Let's see, after that, this was a very last minute decision, so after I had gotten this guy, my action figure, I took a closer look at the shins on him and realized that the little ball joint socket thingies on the ankles, they weren't out as far, and the front plate of the shin actually almost wrapped out towards the outside of it. So I had to cut around that and then pull it out. Originally I wasn't going to do it, and I told myself if I had enough time I would do it. It ended up only being like maybe a 10-minute job, so it wasn't like that bad. So yeah, and then after that I needed to bring down the front opening just a little bit on the front of the shin. I had cut this off earlier a long time ago, and it freed up like just way too much space, and I had to actually bring it back. A little tedious, but nothing, a little bit of paper, markers, and tape, making a quick little template. And then glued all that back on. Yeah, because I believe what I wanted was the shin came down to a straight stop, and I wanted to come out a little bit of a forward swoop. I think that's what I wanted. I didn't get that originally after cutting all that off. But once I put that on, then that meant I needed another internal guide plate as well for the boot to sit on, which meant more paper, more tape, and more markering to make another paper template that would more or less connect between the edge of this and the old pre-existing guide plate that I had put in before. And same thing, transferred that from paper to foam, got the foam out, and glued all that on. All right, then after those last little bit of fitment issues were done with that, came time to do the cool little sword on the front of the shin. Yeah, I think I did like some quick little conversions with a ruler. I more or less just measured like how much space it took up on the shin, and then converted that to my shin, kind of got a rough idea of how tall I wanted it to be, and I was able to start figuring out how wide and everything was. I do believe I rounded everything up to like, maybe not whole numbers, but like 1/4 inches, so like 1 inch, 1.25 inches. Kept it somewhat consistent that way. And then used some more leftover 12mm foam for that. I do believe when I made this, I think I wanted the sword to sit at a 45-degree angle, so I'm pretty sure the blade, I think one side was cut straight and the other side was cut at an angle. That way it would keep it at a 45 peak. Sword handle might have been straight on both though. It's hard to remember. Yeah, so once I had the sword mostly constructed, came time to work on the detailing for that. So there's a scroll that kind of like wraps around the sword, starting from the blade the whole way up to the handle. So I traced the entire thing out on foam. I can't remember how thick this was. It was probably 6 or 8, most likely 6. I more or less just kind of freehanded it to figure out where I wanted it all, and then cut out those pieces individually of the wraparounds. And I ended up doubling up every piece because I wanted to actually like start from the base of the sword and then wrap around it. So to give it some depth, I doubled it up and then cut out in the center where the sword actually was. That way you had like excesses hanging out on the sides that would then kind of like wrap around the edge of the sword. And this was like a little tedious. It was more a constant fear of making sure I had all my pieces aligned properly. Because if I picked something up and flipped it upside down the wrong way, or had it turned the wrong way and then attached things, or attached the wrong one, I'd be more or less starting the whole process over. Sable, if you want up here, just get up here. Oh, there. Just don't get on the table. And I know that's exactly what you're gonna do. All right, and then to make sure I got everything kind of in position, I took the sword and laid it right on top of the drawn out template I made for the scrolls. And then started attaching the side ends up against the side of the sword. Oh, no, 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 no. You are literally walking into the recording hardware. Why would you do that? Wait, so what's this? Oh, this might have been 3 layers. I thought this was 2. Surprising even myself. Sable, no. Yeah, there, you want to say hi to the camera? Be like, hi internet, I'm being bad today. Is that mommy making noise? You gonna go harass her? Okay. Well, that got her out of my hair. Alright, so after the second round of layers on the sides, which apparently I didn't know that I even did, which makes sense, it's 12 millimeters, 2 6s to make 12 to make even, and then the third layer on top, so that does make sense. Yeah, so it would have been 3 layers, okay. Yeah, I must not have any footage of me dremeling that down, so once that was all put together, I found a decent spot on the shin that looks similar to the action figure I'm basing this on, and traced an outline again. When doing that kind of stuff, it's a lot nicer to trace it out before gluing it down. That way you know 100% this is where I want it, and then when you go to glue it, you know you can line it up exactly where you wanted it. And looks like while the glue is drying, I made the little notch on the bottom of the shin as well. There's a bunch of these little notches all over the pieces. So one in the stomach, one in the shin. There's like 1 or 2 somewhere else, I can't remember. And then once everything was pressed on, gave it one more test fit to make sure everything was good. I mean, I guess a test fit wasn't really necessary, but this might have been something for like social media or something. Probably just showing off the work that I did, which we will show. So I do believe I showed this one on Facebook. This was me showing off the foot movements. I had made a bunch of changes, especially to how the shin fit on top of the foot, and it was causing some new issues for the toe, and that's what we'll be talking about next, which will be the feet. But at the same time, I was also checking to make sure, you know, like my thighs were okay, nothing was bow legging, or my knees weren't kind of bending in or out. Making sure I could still walk. Nothing was binding up or giving me any issues. So now that that's all done talking about, let's start talking about the shoes. Yeah, so we are going to jump around a little bit, it looks like. So while I was doing some test fitting, I don't remember if it was from the clip we had just shown or farther back or afterwards, but I noticed something that to walk and to hold my legs kind of straightish, I had to stand my legs farther apart. So I had the idea that my shoes needed to be just a little bit more narrow. So instead of taking in both sides, I would only take in the middle. And what that would do, in theory, would push the shape of the shoe outward and my feet inside the shoe inward. So I could stand and walk more naturally while my character that I am is able to have his legs out farther, which would look more natural to him. It worked. It was a good idea. It didn't give me any problems. No problems walking or anything either. And of course, once I narrowed the foot up again, that means I also had to narrow up the toe. It was already giving me some binding issues, so while I was also narrowing it down, I made sure that I kind of worked on the bevel of the toe as well, so that it would kind of like wrap up a little tighter. Once I got about where I wanted, I finally put the trim around the base of the toe as well, which apparently I hadn't done yet for some reason. And then once I was happy with the shape of the toe and had the clearance that I wanted, came time to start weighing the toe down. So the idea was, if you go all the way back to my boot episode, the theory was I was going to have the toe on a hinge with the boot, so the boot could then hinge where it needed to. So when I would walk, it would bend up into the foot, and or lift my foot up, it would then drop back down. But I didn't want it to keep dropping, so I wanted to stop at a certain point, so I'd have a strap that would run from the top of the toe into the foot, and it'd be the exact length where the toe would land flat with the foot, so my toe would never bend down, which would make walking so much easier. But that also meant that the toe needed to fall down. It needed a weight to it. So I grabbed a bunch of foam, bunch of 12 millimeters, stacked it up like 2 or 3 times, glued it all together, and put it in the very, very tip of the toe. And it looks like this is the same time that I glued then the nylon strap along the top of the toe. And then I also gave some extra pieces on the bottom for where it would hinge on the foot. Let's see, I also wanted to raise the foot up just a little bit higher. So I had grabbed some more 12 millimeter sheet foam and made a new base for just the boot of the foot. Just slapped it underneath. This was less of a cosmetic thing and more of kind of like a toe security thing, so that the toe would always be up just like a little bit higher than the base of the foot, just to make sure that it would never snag on anything. Even with the strap, when my foot would come down, that toe would always be like slightly elevated by like ½ an inch. So in reality, the toe on this is more cosmetic than anything else. I don't use it for anything. It's not, I don't walk on it. It doesn't support anything. It's just there to flap up and down. I was also dealing with a little bit of toe clearance that I thought I had fixed. So I took off the top shield of the foot and repositioned that up just a little bit and changed the angle so it matched more visually in style to the action figure. It didn't fully fix my problem. Down the road I still have a little bit of toe clipping, but I'll figure that out either probably just with more weight. And then more fitment issues, or more fitment adjustments really, trying to get that toe, the tip of the toe, down a little bit more, because it was balled out so much that when I would step the toe up into the foot, it would still snag just a little bit, and apparently I didn't go deep enough. But once that was all finally done and figured out, I put the tread on the base of the shoe, which I actually do have here. This is from Harbor Freight. It's like some kind of traction floor mat stuff, but it's all rubber. It's got a sticky back. Why I have this is because it fell off in the convention first night. I haven't put it back on yet because I'm going to secure it better. But yeah, these aren't that expensive and they provide decent traction. I forget how much they cost though. Like, I'm spitballing here, but I want to say maybe like $6 a sheet, and I needed 4. Yeah, that sounds about right. But yeah, then glued those traction pads on with some hot glue, which was a bad idea. I probably should have done some, what's that called, E6000 or something, or E3600. I can't remember what it is. That really strong stuff. I should have used it, and I will use it because I actually have some back in our little storeroom. And once I had those all glued on, came time to do the fun work of gluing the toe to the shoe. I was going to do this after painting, but I figured worst case scenario, I'll hand paint any white foam that I see remaining, because I wanted to streamline the whole thing. I wanted to just take everything out all at once and paint it later on. So started gluing the underside of the nylon thread, put the shoe down, rest the toe all the way up against it, and just press those nylon strips down against, because now at this point I'm doing everything blind because my hand is inside the thing. As you can see, I'm kind of doing it with a flashlight, making sure that I'm just dropping hot glue onto the top of it just to make sure I kind of got everything good. And then once that was done with the toe down in the down position, I took the nylon strap that was on the top, ran it up around the top of the shoe, and then just secured that in place. So that strip is pretty much what's holding it from dropping down past a flat foot position. That way I don't have a dead toe. And then I did one more full body, well, lower from midsection down test fit. This is probably part of a test fit from before, or from later, but this will show off the extra belt pieces and stomach details that I forgot to record for some reason, as I'm putting on the belt from like 2 episodes ago. Eventually I do end up permanently attaching this to the whole thing. But you can kind of see, like, I think I mentioned this in the belt episode, or maybe it was the midsection, or I can't remember. But I added like the actual belt to the midsection when it's never going to be seen, because not only will there be a tabard in front, but there's also like the belt that then wraps around in front of that. So it's a pointless detail I added, but if I was to rip all these pieces off the action figure, that would be there. So why not? I mean, that, and if I don't show it off here, who else is going to see it? Absolutely nobody. The judges at the contest sure didn't see it. And then that led us to our final toe test. I don't have this in a landscape recording. This was one of the ones I did for TikTok and Reels and stuff like that to show off the mobility. So the toe movement here is good. I don't know if this video will show it or not, but if I start like walking, it will get caught. And then like halfway through the walk, then it falls. I'm not seeing it here, so I guess I didn't catch it. Yeah, right there, right at the end. But yeah, you can see how, I even knew about it then because it was clipping, not clipping, but it was snagging. All right, so that's the entire bottom half of the detailing. Should stop here for time, but screw it, let's do it all in one go. So where are we going next? Lower body, boots, helmet. What did we do here? Okay, so now we need to do the, I can't show it here. Can we focus? Yeah. So on the side of his face, he has an indentation in his mouth guard of one of their crosses. Maybe this camera can pick it up better. There we go, that guy. And that's what I wanted. Breathing is not fun because I don't have any holes anywhere to breathe from except like straight down. But what I did was same as anything else so far, I traced it off of my monitor, scaled it to size, and then just made that paper template, traced it out the foam there, and then put that template on the mask, drew out where I wanted it, and then just carved it right out. So I made a second piece of thinner foam because I believe the mask was 8 or 10 millimeters. So I took a sheet of 6mm foam and then used that as a recess. I had it more flush on the inside, so you'd have like that cool lip on the outside. Ooh, let's pause right there. So in the back there, I apparently did not record this at all, apparently. So I think in the helmet episode, I had put like a small fan in the very top, and then I had the front kind of take air in. After some test fits, I wasn't happy with how thin the helmet was. So I had to widen the helmet out, but I also didn't want to cut the helmet up, especially since I was happy with how the front looked. So I got the idea, I'll split it top center, go the whole way down the back, and then just crack it open that way. I figured worst case scenario, doesn't work, just glue it back together, no one's gonna see it. It gave me the width that I needed and retained the front shape of the face. So that's what you're kind of seeing in the back there, and why the little on-off switch in the back is offset now, because it was at one point in the middle. But when because I already had it in and glued in and everything. But when I did that, I also made sure that I dug out the second layer, the second internal layer of that channel that goes down the back, because it was 2 pieces of 10mm foam laminated. So I ripped the inner one out, and that gave me a whole back channel down the back, up to the front of the head. So I opened up the back of the helmet. So now that little fan that blows air into my face to make sure my visor stays defogged, it's now pulling air in from both front and back. So it has the best airflow ever. Yeah, it looks like I'm doing a couple fitment adjustments just to get the helmet up just a little bit. How do I put this? I'm still not 100% happy with how low the chest is. I still want it to be up like maybe 2 more inches, which would also mean that my head would have to go up even higher on top of that. But I can't raise the helmet any higher, otherwise then I can't see, because right now I'm looking out of the bottom of the eyelets. The only other solution I would have to fixing that probably would be to raise the stilts in the shoe and then drop the midsection and everything else. Now that's possible too, to get what I want, but that's a lot of work. Now that all the crunch is done, I probably could do something like that, but I'll figure it out, because I'll get to that in like the next 5 episodes when I talk about it being done. Because there is a laundry list of what I want to finish on that. Yeah, so once I think I got the extra little height adjustments inside of that, I finished up the brand new air duct and all the channels inside. So while this was pretty much close to being done, I wanted to kind of run a test fit for the visor that I'm going to put in it, which you see lighting up back here. I ended up buying a pair of like Rave goggles that have like the batteries in the side and buttons that turn everything on. The downside was that the buttons were facing the outside, and I was gonna have to pull them out, flip them around and all that stuff. But here I was just running a test just to see where things would fit, if it would fit and all of that. I had to do some trimming and stuff in the end, but that's in the future. Yeah, this was another helmet test fit video. You can see just how close I am to the ceiling. Insanely close. But I do believe this is one of the videos that I put on TikTok and all my reels and stuff like that. But I believe this was after I had made those fitment adjustments inside the helmet. And I was checking my clearance, making sure everything was good side to side and all that stuff. Man, okay, so this really is going to be a long one. Okay, so now that we're done screwing around with the helmet, let's go on to the pauldron, because so far that has just a blank slate of nothing. First up, we will do the little shield in front of the pauldron. There we go, that thing. This required just not really any math, just some guesswork and some rounding numbers up or down somewhere, figure out what I wanted in size. Drew out a template for the whole thing. Yeah, and once that was out on foam, I traced that all out. I only had to cut it out once, so I wasn't worried about like tracing anything. I just literally just cut around it. Yeah, because that would have been 12mm foam. Yeah, and then I used 5mm foam, and instead of cutting it out beforehand, I think I did this for some of my accessories. I glued both ends of these together because this shield has a curve to it. So once the glue dried, I kind of took both pieces and bent them. Once I had them bent into shape, then I glued them together. This way they're both applying tension to each other, and that curve will now stay. I've used the same technique, not just in like the little accessories like the Templar cross on the hip, which you can't see there. I've also used it on the wings on the Pauldron for my Terminator chaplain, which you can also not see, of which I'll put an image there. But it was the same process. It was 2 sheets of foam bent and then pressed together. That way they're not like whatever, if they can't return to their normal position because all that tension was there prior to gluing, so the glue is holding the tension kind of, I don't know. There's a philosophy to it, but I am not smart enough to remember. I think it's all the contact spent. It's making me dumb. Once I had that, I tried to find the center of it, mostly by just kind of spinning it a little bit on my hand just to find where the peak of the bevel was, and I just kind of eyeballed it. More or less I used like, I think it was a 1/2-inch PVC pipe fitting with a screw end on one. And the idea was going to be that I would have that glued to the back of the shield, and then it would press in through a hole in the pauldron, and then the fitting would screw in the back. This would give it a little bit of elevation off of the shield, which is what I want. So like the actual, I don't know, wrench part of the fitting would be like maybe 3/4 of an inch off from the pauldron. But once I got that where I wanted it, I hot glued the crap out of it onto the back of the shield. And I didn't have to worry anything about the pauldron aside from cutting out the hole. That way if I ever need to take it off or anything, I can take it off. And from there came time to make the cross on the shield. I can't remember what kind of cross this is. I looked it up once just out of curiosity. It looks like the Black Templars, they use 2 different styles of crosses. One of them is this one. I believe it's called a Batiste cross or something like that. I really should do some research before this stuff, shouldn't I? But anyway, this is the exact cross that Templars used during the Crusades. The other cross they use, I think it's just called a St. John cross, and it was, I am not up to par with my religious history, but it's a slightly different cross, which is what I end up using on my corners of my cape later. Yeah, it's like a much thinner version, and I think the ends are a little more like rounded. So again, I took an image and I just kept scaling it up until I got about what I wanted. I think I used the paper first and wrapped it around the pauldron to kind of find my maximum points. But like, I can't go any higher than this or that. And because the image is bigger than my monitor, I just kind of took my paper and flipped it, traced it, flipped it, traced it. And then once I had it all traced out, I believe I found the center of it and I folded it 4 times until I just had the one corner, and then cut that out. That way I knew for sure those corners would be consistent. And I didn't really need the rest of it because when I start making my cuts for it, it's gonna be all angle cuts. So I just kind of took everything that was folded and just taped it. Cut it down the center too because the 2 pieces are gonna be peaked. So explaining the cuts on this is gonna be a little tricky. The center is a 45-degree, and then everything outward is a 45-degree away from it. So the only way to describe it is that it was a nightmare. I got several pieces wrong and had to redo them. Another reason to always cut extra. So yeah, the way this would have worked was, so those 2 pieces that I'm tracing out are your left and right. So one of them I was going to have a straight cut in the center, and the other one was going to be a 45 cut in the center so that they would peak together at a 45-degree angle. If I did 45 cuts on both of them, it would be a 90-degree, and that's way too sharp. but I had to make this for both the left and right pauldron, and I don't even remember how many pieces that is. 4, 8, 16. I had to do 16. So anyway, once those were all glued, started pressing them all together. So after I had all that made, I pressed it down onto the pauldron to make sure everything was the right size, and it was. But I had an issue where I realized that, well, the center of this is peaked up, and if I try and glue the inside of this and press it down, that's going to bring all those peaks down, and it's not going to look good. So the idea I had was, well, why don't I take some 6mm foam or 5mm or something like that and glue that to that first, and then I'll then glue that whole unit to the shield. So that's what I did. Grabbed a couple sheets of foam. This must have been 5mm because this looks like Hobby Lobby foam, and traced it to size. I think because of the size of it, it wouldn't fit on a normal sheet, so I had to kind of like cut the sheet down the center and then offset it just to make it all fit. And then I glued the two pieces together and then laminated both the inner and outer. But once that was all cleaned up, I was like, okay, now we're good enough. I can have a full contact patch on the inside now that I know that that cross is gonna stay forever. So glued the crap out of the whole thing. Cleaned up the center line of the pauldron first, just to make sure I had good contact, and figure while I was there, get the whole thing. And then just more or less covered the entire pauldron in glue. I should have done what I did with everything else and traced the cross first, so I knew exactly where I wanted it. It probably would have been, it turned out fine either way. So once that came down, came time to attach the skulls. Yeah, this is another thing I'm missing footage on, a lot of missing footage in this. So to explain how I made the skulls, let's see, what other videos do I have where I talk about that? You can check out the video on making the sword, the handle on that. I made skulls for that, or Purity Seals, you can check that one out. You can also check out one of my really old videos that talks about making this whole suit and my Terminator chaplain, which is off to the room, or off to the side. For all of them, I have made hot glue molds. Process was more or less, I doused a plastic skull in hot glue, took the hot glue off after it dried, filled that full of foam clay, put the foam clay in the freezer. Once it was all frozen, brought it out, popped it out of the mold, let it sit, let it dry for a couple days, probably about a week, just to be sure because of how thick it is. And then, yeah, by the time I had done that, it had already been weeks. So I did those like weeks in advance. Pro tip though, when you're doing a hot glue mold, probably applies to any other kind of mold too. Like I said in the other videos, a little spray of some kind of oil or something, it creates a nice film in between your mold and the foam clay. Foam clay doesn't soak it up that I'm aware of. If it does minimal damage. It makes releasing from the mold way nicer, at least with hot glue molds, because they're very stiff and rigid. They do have some flex to them, but anyway, yeah, see that stuff for that info. So yeah, voila, skulls are made. Just glue them in the back and then just attached them straight to the cross. Then I started adding some details to the pauldron shield. I don't have the full footage of this, just of the chain, but that was made of 2mm foam. I figured it would make it easier to paint in the end if I just made the whole thing out of foam first, and then just kind of, it would look way too flat and cheap if I just painted it on afterwards. So I made the chain out of 2mm foam. Yeah, then I did the same for everything else. Give me 2 seconds and I will see if I can get it without knocking anything over. All right, now I'm back. Okay, so which camera's gonna like this more? Ooh, this one really doesn't like it. Cool, we'll show it to this one. All right, so yeah, you can see the cross down here, the chain, and then the two Imperium guys. That's all 2mm foam. I kind of did it this way to make it more simple, not so much in terms of simple for me to make, but simple in terms of my reference material is this guy here. My reference material is this guy. So I'm kind of riding this weird fine line between, am I making a giant action figure, or am I making something that's, you know, like, where is it? And I never found a fine line where I wanted that, but that's where the inspiration was for this came from. I was like, well, we'll make it simple so it has that action figure-y thing to it, like, oh, it's a scaled up action figure. I mean, I do like the aesthetic. It needs painted a little better, but whatever. I guess I can show you now from the back of this. You can see, yeah, there we go. The back of that, this will rest up against the pauldron, and then this screws in from the back side and sandwiches itself in that 10mm foam on the shield. And we have another test fit. Yeah, this was a video I took that I never ended up posting, but it was just showing off more detail work. So this would have been before shield detail. All right, only 2 to go, backpack and chest. Let's see how long the backpack takes us. All right, so the backpack still had a lot of stuff to do. I kind of had it in a state of done-ish, but still needed all the details. So in this case, I needed the front vents and the bottom, and like all the weird plating around the circle piece in the back. So I measured all that out, cut that out, or drew that all out in marker first. And then for the squares, I think it was 3 inches. Cut them all out to size and shape, just glued a crap around it, and then just started attaching everything. This was super easy. I don't remember if I beveled the edges on it or not. I did end up filling in those vents in the bottom center at some point, but I must not have shown it. So after that came time to finally close in the little jets in the back. I was going to redo them entirely, but I was starting to get pressed for time, so I didn't even touch them. So I made some inner squares to kind of like seal off these the pieces in the middle there, and then the bigger squares kind of closed off the whole outer side. The only reason I did that to the inner squares was because I was way too lazy to cut them flush or anything, and I figured no one's getting close enough to look at them, so I'll just close them off and that'll be that. I could have done vents or something inside too, or something fancy, but yeah. But once those are in, then came time to do the vents for the side jets in the top. I somehow traced out the inner circle. I don't know if I'd saved a piece or something from before, and then I just did some quick math and started drawing out the like the grill and the vents for that. I don't remember off the top of my head what my measurements were. But yeah, then I took the piece, I trimmed it a little bit smaller so I could have kind of like an idea of where the grill would stop, and it would be consistent the whole way around. Yeah, then after I cut those pieces out, I glued the back of the grill, and then I put those pieces back in. This way, when I go to glue everything in, the lines in the grill will stay consistently flat, and then I can just take the inner pieces and just pull them right out. And I had put them onto a second piece on the inside, a second circle, I mean, because for how far recessed that was, I needed that grill to be farther out, and the grill didn't need to be open, it just needed to have the texture of being open, so I had it glued straight up against that. And then to get it to the height that I wanted, I cut out some random scrap pieces and attached them to the back of that full circle in just like a weird pattern, just to make sure that it was evenly consistent, so when I pushed it up in, like nothing would sag or dip. I had like 4 in the corners, and I think I had like a bunch of pieces coming towards the center. Yeah, so after that, pushed it in, and then I do believe probably the inside would have been dry, but I bet the the outer side probably was wet. That way when I'd push it in, the outer side wouldn't be able to slide, and then I'd just let that dry on its own. But once that was in and I had everything lined up how I wanted, then I took out the individual strips for the grill. That way everything stayed. After that was then just a few small details. On the sides, there were a couple circles on some squares. Cut them out, glued them on. The majority of all of my circles, I swear, are all based on my freaking cans of contact cement. If it's not the base, it's the lid. I don't know why. Probably because it's the most round thing I have within reach, and if it's close enough to the size, that's what it is. So many things are based on that. Oh yeah, another thing, I think I mentioned it on Facebook, and I might have mentioned it maybe somewhere around here before. When I was doing the top part of the backpack, for some reason I put the grill in the back, but I also put it in the front. And yeah, that grill right there, I put it in the back, but I also put it in the front, but it's not, it's not on that side. So I had to fill that back in with some foam, and then I just tried dremeling it smooth, and it's not pretty. But I filled it in with later on I filled it in with a ton of quick seal and stuff to try and smooth it all out. It's not that noticeable because it's all behind my head, but let's see, was there anything else? No, I just went over everything with a Dremel just to smooth some edges and clean some stuff up. I do believe I have another, yeah, this was another video that I was going to put on Facebook and TikTok and all that, and I never did. It was showing off everything that we had just now put on. I never did show any of this for some reason, but I don't think anything on this was that interesting to show. But we're just showing off everything that was done. Not too bad. In hindsight, there are some adjustments I would like to do to it later. It's hard to say. I feel like the top might be just a hair too high, or the whole thing just needs lowered some, which I will do an adjustment later because it sticks out from the back just a hair and I want to bring it in. So I'm going to do something about that later down the road, especially if I go to hit another convention with it, which I have been asked about when I'm going and where I'm going. I'm going here or there. It depends on what I feel like doing. All right. So last but not least, we're probably way in past our video ending time now, is the chest. Can't remember off the top of my head what all we did. No, a lot. Looks like a lot. Okay, let's just dive into it. So, first up, this is actually going back quite a bit. So I had, in the chest video, one of the videos, I had put the gorget around on the chest piece. Upon getting this, which would have been like episode 6-ish, if you go through like my playlist, I can't remember what episode it was. I don't have the unboxing video for this listed as an episode, but it's still in the playlist because it falls in that category of stuff. So for the first like 2 months of the production of this, I was basing everything on this action figure based solely on production photos, like promo photos or whatever you want to call them, stock photos. So they provide a lot of detail, but not every single angle, which is one of the reasons when I go to make something, I like to have something physical to make it off of. But what I had found out was that parts of the gorget were different than what I had thought, what I had seen in the pictures. One, it was lower than I had expected. That might have just been an issue I had done, because I think when I put it on originally, I think I lined it up exactly with where the rounded gorget was for the regular Mark 10 suit. But upon looking at this and making comparisons to what I had, it was way too high, and it had to be way lower, like 2 to 3 inches lower. Also, I can't really show it here. Maybe I can. The part that sticks up really high is only up to about the halfway point, and then it's really short around the back. So I had to correct that as well. And there's the little trim piece right in front of the whole thing. That straight up ends where it cuts off on the side. So I also had to fix that, which also meant that I got to extend the back out some too. So all in all, I got to make the entire thing bigger. I don't know if this was before or after I realized I had to make the helmet bigger as well. It might have been before, because I think after I put that on, I realized my helmet was indeed smaller. But I mean, I'm not going to go into full details and things, but at a certain point I did start measuring everything on this and was like doing conversions to make sure this was this wide versus this wide. And but the helmet was way too thin. Every other dimension from front to back, top to bottom was right. It was just the width that was too small. So when I got that right, it was the same with the gorget and everything else. That's a mouthful. So yes, back to the video now. I had to widen that out, bring it down, bring it back, cut off the excess. I was more or less almost starting over from scratch. Well, not entirely. I still was able to reuse the gorget and everything itself. But, so here's the cool part. This was entirely not planned. But, so I had tried taking off the base and it was not coming off without a fight. So I had figured, all right, so I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm going to move the gorget from the inside of it to the very outside, and I'll just put a brand new one on the outside. Yeah, so then once I had that on, I still had a little bit of excess in the back because I had widened everything out. I used some duct tape to figure out a new template for the trim around the guard on the neck. And just to make sure no one could see that trim that I had made from the inside, I made a paper template that would then fill in from edge to edge, from the top of the neck guard all the way down to that trim on the inside. This took some trial and error and lots of paper. At the time, I also then made a new back piece to wrap around the back that extended the back out. And then I continued doing the paper template, getting the inside first so I could tape it in, and then tracing the outside and then cutting that off. Once I had that, I only needed 1/2, as long as everything else was consistent. And transferred that to foam as well. That didn't have to be super thick, so I do believe that was 6mm foam. Yeah, if that's a roll of white, that's most likely 6mm. I broke it into 4 pieces just to make it easier on me, which I don't have the completed assembly on that either, do I? Nope. Missing footage on that as well. Let's see, so from here, what was I doing? Yeah, so from here, it looks like I'm making some support for the back. Yeah, surprise, surprise, more missing footage. You can see that the sides of the arms, or the armholes, are now black. There's also a piece of black trim on the inside along the bottom hole of the chest where it slides down on top of me. That was all 12mm foam. That must have been done off camera, maybe like morning after work or something. But I was having issues where every time I was trying on the chest piece, that when I put my arm through, I started popping the foam out. It was way too thin and it was causing me issues. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna grab the thickest stuff I have, replace that. And not only did it make the whole thing stronger, it doesn't pop out anymore. Same with the bottom trim. I did that so that it would fit more snug on the midsection and also hold the shape of the bottom. That way nothing would flex side to side, front to back. It kind of held it. But what I'm doing here, I'm also making a support piece for the open back. The template I had nothing to fill in there, so I took a giant piece of 12mm foam and then just made a template to fit all that in and just flushed all that on. Yeah, filled all that in. Let's see, after that, came time to rig up the cooling. This is actually kind of cool. So, when you're making any kind of large suit, you want to stay cool, because these things will they don't generate heat, you generate heat, and they're not going to dissipate any heat. They're going to hold the heat. It's going to stay in there. So you need a way to kind of get air flowing, and the best way to do that is with fans. So a lot of the stuff I've used in the past, I've used like battery packs and computer fans and stuff like that. Things have gotten a lot more advanced in the last few years since I've made a decent costume. So what I use this time, if you check it out before I put it in, if you can see it, I bought a like a neck fan that you wrap around your neck and off of Amazon. It was insanely cheap. I can't remember how much it was off the top of my head. I want to say it was like 20 bucks tops. But what's best about it is it's USB it's USB charged. So I don't ever have to take it out. I can just plug it in and, you know, let it charge for however many hours, and then it's good for an entire convention day. Not to talk about the convention already, but so during the convention on the first Saturday night, I had the neck fan fully charged. I had it on for 6 to 7 hours. I want to say about 7 hours total. The fans finally died on me backstage at the costume contest. So I want to say that, yeah, the costume contest, I think it was at 6 and it ended at 8. And I want to say they died at 7. Probably like a half hour, 45 minutes before I even went on stage. So when people were asking me like, how long can you last inside that suit? I was like, I can last as long as the fans last. And in this case, about 6-7 hours. Now, in my defense, I didn't even have the fans turned on high. I think I had them on medium. So the battery life is something you do got to take into consideration with something like this. But it's super awesome to have. So let's stop rambling. All I did was make some like foam brackets. Like, actually, remember when I said that I made some extra links in the chain for my chains? Well, I needed some brackets to hold this into the body. I had a good handful left over, so I took those, cut them in half. They fit perfectly over top of it, and that's exactly what I did. It was an insanely easy thing to set up. When it came time to paint, I just made sure that I wrapped the fan segments. That way any spray paint couldn't get in and gunk up anything. Let's see. And from there, okay, so I guess I can't say this is all detailing. I'm doing some other crap too. Electronic hardware setups. Screw it, we're talking about it. So, I don't think I have any sitting around, and I'm not unplugging myself again. Or will I? Okay, so like I had said, it's been a couple years since I've made a full suit. And since then, times have changed a lot. So instead of buying battery packs, I can now get USB backup batteries. So I believe these are called lipstick battery packs. They're USB, of course, backup batteries for whatever. But what's cool is that because they're USB powered, anything with a USB source can plug into this. So Saturday, I took the suit to the convention. Batteries die on me Saturday night. So 7 o'clock or whatever. By the time I get home, obviously the batteries in the thing are dead. That fan has an internal battery, but I want to wear the suit again tomorrow, and I need to charge the fans. I don't want to take it in the house just to charge it. So take a USB, plug this into it, leave that in the car overnight, come back in the morning, fans are fully charged again. These came in a pack of 2 off of Amazon. I can't remember how much they were, but they're pretty cheap. But this also means that everything else I have in the suit can also be powered by USB. And if I make a little pouch for this, this is so much lighter than a giant box full of like 16 AA's, which is how the Terminator is set up, which I really should switch that over now that I have this. That'd make it so much lighter. Well, not much, make it like a pound lighter. Anyway, we are now being visited by the kitty cat, Sable. No, you're not knocking stuff over. You're not knocking stuff over. I know you're bored. Why don't you walk around the back like you always do? Okay, so now that I talked about the batteries, the helmet, the internal fan, and all that switches and stuff for it, it also runs on USB. So in the back, I decided I was making a pouch that could hold this USB charger. And then I could just plug the fans for the helmet in, slide that in the back, leave it in its pouch. Now the helmet fan lasted the entire time. When I took this out, this wasn't even halfway dead. So that fan could have stayed on all day. So that's what I liked. So what I was doing was, Jesus, I need to stop rambling so much. So I'm glad I had two. So what I did was, came home, took this one out of the pouch in the chest, plugged it into the fan for the neck fan to let that charge, and then had this in the house charging overnight. And then when I got out, I could just throw this in the back of the neck, plug the helmet into that, and then take this one, throw it in the house. It's kind of nice. I mean, you can just kind of swap them around, out and around and all that. But yeah, so I needed to make a pouch for that battery, and it's nice and compact and small, so I love it. I found a small spot in the back of the neck that I wasn't touching. I did a couple test fits real quick to make sure I had enough space, and I had more than enough room. So I made like a tiny little box out of foam and just put it right in the back. It's kind of sideways, but also at a slight upward angle. That way it can kind of go in, and then just gravity keeps it there. I don't know if I would have had enough room to just do a whole vertical, but I want to be able to get it in and out with these. So more or less, I could just actually take the helmet off, and then take the cord and then just pull the whole thing out with it. Let's see. Once all the internal electronics were all taken care of, it just came time to do the remaining chest details. So in this case, it would be the little piece there on the back of the neck, and that little silver bit under the arm that connects from the back to a little piece there underneath. But yeah, so for the bottom part, I just made a box out of like 8mm foam. Gave it a little bit of an angle, you know, and then along the side, then I just used another piece of like 6 or 8mm foam, ran a strip along that, and gave it some sectional pieces in between. I don't know what that is. That looks like 12mm maybe. Just glued it in place on the back plating underneath the armpits, and then kind of figured out how much space I needed then for the back of the neck. And that was supposed to also be sectioned, but I figured it was never going to be seen, so it was just there to be there. So I think I took this one sheet of like 6 or 8mm foam, rounded it off, and I just glued it on. And as far as remaining B-roll to show off the chest piece and everything else all done, some of these might actually look kind of familiar. So this is some leftover B-roll from I believe it was the intro for the sword episode. Yeah, I was trying to get the entire thing on, suiting some stuff up, putting the gloves on, doing my little fist, trying to take my hat off, and all my floofy hair. This was when I realized I cannot put my helmet on when I have my arms in. So if I'm going to put my helmet on myself, I have to have my arms out through the armpits first. I believe this was actually my first take from the intro for that, and it failed miserably, so I didn't even use it. I think I used a part of it for like a TikTok and reel and stuff like that. But yep, another episode down. I believe next will be sewing. So be the tabard and cape. Cape's way more detailed than the tabard, and you never even get to see it, especially now since it's up against the wall. But we'll cover that next, I guess. Still a couple more small details left. We'll cover that in the prep for paint stuff in the paint episode. Oh geez. But still have no idea how to end these. I am out of coffee again. Press whatever buttons you want. I don't care. I don't care if this gets 5 views. I'm still going to be crafting either way, so whatever. Later.